Hello there, welcome back to another set of shows. That's me back after my break. From now on I'm actually going to just do shows when I feel like it more than trying to rack out like 4 or 5 a week. I'll do them as I go. I may just revert back to 4 or 5 a week depending, but I'm going to try and make it a bit more random, but we'll see how it goes. I tend to like doing things, you know, in a clump, but we'll see how it goes. I'm going to start with a Kubrick video that was inspired by, is that the right word? You know, it was prodded by a video that Folgers Boys made where they ranked their favourite Kubrick films, and because they're fairly young, merely chiclets in life, you know, they had a certain youthful exuberance in their opinion that is different from someone who's a bit older, a bit greyer, you know. So I thought it'd be interesting to do a different one where I'll see how I can rank Kubrick films, because he's one of my favourite directors. Don't take it too seriously because these will change over time. I adore Kubrick films, so even his worst ones I have some affection for, so don't take it too seriously, is my main point. This is the point where I should recommend the Folgers channel and the SGS channel. I should. Anyway, time to move on. I'm going to start with my lowest ranking. My least favourite Kubrick film is Work for Hire and Spartacus. I'm actually going by what I watched least, what would be my least likely to watch. And it is Spartacus. It's like, even some of his earlier, weaker films, I'd probably watch them over Spartacus. Spartacus does not feel like a Kubrick film. There's moments it feels like a Kubrick film when they're in the arena getting trained, that feels like Kubrick, and when they escape, that feels like Kubrick. But so much the film does not feel like Kubrick, it feels like other people involved, because it's very much a Kirk Douglas production. And I find the film kind of pretty boring at times. I enjoyed this film as a kid, but as I got older I find it fairly uninvolving, and it's not something I'd really chase up. I don't think Kubrick's a big fan of it either. It's just not that good a film, so it's the lowest on my rating, really. I mean, yeah, you can see it's really professional, it's really well done, yeah, but it's boring. The script's not that good, so to me it's his worst film. Now I'm going to go to Killer's Kiss, which was his second film he made, and it was a film, it was his last, like, what you call kind of amateurish production. I mean, his first 2 films were fairly amateur. They had to deal with actors, whatever actors he'd get, and he wasn't dealing with the best script, so he had to use a lot of his own visual invention to get himself going. And Killer's Kiss is a typical noir story of a boxer and his double crosses, and it's most notable for the ending chase where they're going through over the rooftops of New York and into this one area where we got all these dummies, and there's lots of interesting imagery in it, but the imagery has to do most of the heavy lifting because the story's not that good, and it is fairly amateurish at times. I mean, it is, you can tell a good director made it, but you can tell it's an early film, and it is pretty hard going to get to the good stuff. I mean, it's another one where I probably wouldn't watch it if I had much of a choice. It's when you watch it out of duty more than anything else. Next is Fear and Desire. Fear and Desire is Kubrick's first film. It's a film he does not like to talk about. He tried to get deleted, basically. He did not like this film. He thought it was amateurish and pretentious, and it is. It really is. But I kind of enjoyed it despite all that. I mean, it doesn't have very many good actors. It is with the idea of wandering through this war zone, and it's pretentious how the good guys and bad guys marry each other. It is a kind of bit of a point, and there's lots of very youthful, you know, over-egging of metaphor, and it's not very good. It does feel very amateurish, but you can see the early Kubrick in little spots, and it does have this weird mood that would go through his films, you can tell it's a Kubrick film, even though there are a hell of a lot of flaws. And because I like filming a lot of flaws, the flaws in this film are very endearing to me. I mean, it is the first film on this list I would happily watch. You know, it has its problem, I'd still happily watch Fear and Desire. It is enjoyable. It's sometimes not for the reasons intended. Sometimes you can tell it was made by a very young man with ideas above his station, or at least the station then. And it could have done with better writing and better acting and better most things. But the atmosphere is terrific, and just this idea of being lost in a war zone is a good idea. It's just one of those ideas you wish Kubrick made later in his career, because he probably could have found the right actors and writers and did something with it without being pretentious about it. So that's those are the three that I would say are the kind of the very weak ones. The next one is the one that's revered that I don't like. That's Clockwork Orange. This is the last film in this list that I don't adore. Really, every other film from now on I adore. This one, no. This one, it has a good first half hour where Malcolm McDowell plays Alex, how his drugs go around terrorising people, and there's a lot of sense of play, sense of this weird idea of what the world looks like to these teenagers inside their head, and it's exploded into the culture in a way that any kind of culture will bow to teenagers if they've got money to spend. And it's these spoiled brats who are very violent, very bored, and it's all about the idea of what do you do with your violent youth? Do you let them develop on their own and hopefully get better, or do you try and condition them? The problem with this film is I think it's very smug. I don't think it goes through all its ideas the way it should. I think after the first third, when Alex gets caught and goes to prison, it becomes like a cartoon. And you've got all these cartoonish characters who he's dealing with, and they're overacting, and it's not quite as good as it thinks it is. And I think it doesn't really follow through with its ideas. It takes a very basic metaphor in a way that Kubrick did with Fear and Desire, which was, and that was that there it was the idea of war and makes you lose your bearings. And this one is the idea of what do you do with violence to defend yourself? Do you get better on your own, or do you allow the government to manipulate you or manipulate the culture around you to actually make you fit in better? Which could be a good idea, but it's done as this weird sci-fi conceit where he's brainwashed and he suddenly hates violence, and to me it's a very simplistic view of what government does to its people and what government does to in life. And basically when he gets cured, it's like, well, in real life no one gets cured, everyone just gets messed about by the government and end up losing their bearings, and that's it. That's what everyone else in the film gets. And so the Alex character becomes a fantasy figure and it's very annoying. It does feel like Kubrick cops out a lot in this film, and he doesn't really follow through, and it's a much stronger film there if they managed to get away from Alex after a while and just said, okay, this is what happened to him, and found a different way around the problem of him in the second half, because it just becomes really obvious, and you've got a lot of scenes where you know where it's going and you have to sit through the scenes. And it's a Kubrick film where the acting's overplayed. This is the one film where he lets actors go too much and gets them too broad, and it's all in the service of stuff that's kind of obvious. It's a very young man's film. It's a film that a young man would actually find impressive. Yes, I am getting the Folgers boys a little bit here, because they love this film, but I just think it's a very immature film, and I think Kubrick was better than this, and I think he made a easy cash in the youth movement in this one. I don't think it's in any way as good as any of his other films that I cover from now on, because it does not have the depth of the other films. It's got a lot of style. And it's actually tried by a Richard Lester film. I mean, Richard Lester was another American who came to London and made his films there, and was very satirical and had a dark view of humanity. But unless they're films like The Bed Sitting Room and How I Won the War, they are much deeper films about British inertia and how nobody gets out alive in the British system, how it just destroys you and just wears you down. Unless there is actually took the theme a lot darker, more interesting places, like Kubrick did in this film. And to me, Clockwork Orange is just a bit of a cop-out movie. It's not the same level as any of the other Kubrick films of the era, and it's just like, it's an easy hit. But a more searching film would have found a way to deal with Alex in a more interesting way and made a way that would make you think. Cause it's just like, he's got a problem, how do you solve it? And what does that mean to the freedoms of people within a society? Well, any society is a variety of different people and different opinions, which always change, and it's much more complex than this film presents. This film just presents a society that's starched and corrupt in a very evil way that's very comic booky, and it doesn't really under the skin of all the problems we're facing in Britain at the time. It just feels very basic. So to me, this is a very flawed Kubrick film. So that's why it's fairly low on the totem pole. Okay, next on the list is Full Metal Jacket. This is the first of the films I adore. Now, Full Metal Jacket loses a few points in the second half because the first half is so good. The first half is about the dehumanisation of the soldiers to go to war, which is a much more naturalistic theme than they did in Clockwork Orange. Clockwork Orange is like using weird science. This one is just how society does it to create soldiers. It takes the violence of man and organises it and just aims it at a direction the state does not like, and it feels a much more brutal look at how people are destroyed en masse just for the sake of the state. And the first half hour is just, the first half of the film was just brutal, tearing down. This is what happens in real life all the time. People go to Paris Island for a war and they're destroyed psychologically, just become weapons. And how people create tribes within that, for anyone who's feeling is bullied, and how utterly brutal the whole situation is. And then of course, as soon as they leave Paris Island, they go to Vietnam, and Vietnam is just this haze of, you know, counterculture, but violence always around. So people have all these rules of the people, top brass coming down on them. This culture from home they have to adhere to, but they've also, some of them are very much into counterculture and are very rebellious against their own orders, and it's about a society that has been left its own devices, and it's just fragmenting. And it's like, what happens when these people have been destroyed and then they've been let loose in a culture that doesn't deserve this hostility towards them, and how that destroys this one culture, which is Vietnam. Because this is a culture with lots of own problems, and then they throw in all these Americans who have been abused and given weaponry and just sent there to just kill, and have all these weird pretensions of they're doing the right thing. And it's about how a society can go insane and can make its youth insane and can send that insanity towards other countries. And it's just very haunting film that actually gets darker and more twisted the more you watch, and there's a lot of depth to it under the surface. But it's such an entertaining film that you can just watch it just to watch it, because it's so much fun, even though it's really dark. Because it's a really funny film, but there is a darkness beneath it, that this society, how societies destroy our societies, and how people are destroyed within the military regiment. The next film is also a military-based film, and that is Paths of Glory. Now, some people might have had it higher because it's viewed as a very humanist film. It's a very, you know, anti-war. It shows you the corruption of the war machine, and it shows you how these generals order an attack that would have failed. So people disobey and they decide to blame 3 soldiers to be shot to make an example to the troops not to do that again. And it's about how Colonel Dax, played by Kirk Douglas, is a defence attorney for these 3 soldiers, is trying to show that this is insanity, and it shouldn't have been done. You're just killing your own people for the sake of your own egos. But it's more really about the idea that this is going to happen anyway. It's like, no matter what you can argue about, they're making a political example. They're not going to back down at all. They're going to make a political example. People are going to get the message, and that's the way the system works. The system works because the people in power are willing to abuse power. And if you're a small clog in that machine, you will be abused and destroyed. Just the same way in Full Metal Jacket, if you're a recruit in Paris Island, you will be destroyed in some way. Here, it's in the war zone and they're still getting destroyed. I mean, Full Metal Jacket and Paths of Glory are very much joined at the hippest films. They are about the war machine and the moral compromises governments make within war, and how they view people as basically cogs in the machine that have to operate for them, for their egos and for their ideology to work. And it doesn't matter who you are, you will be destroyed if you are in the wrong place at the wrong time, and that's it. It's just potluck. And no matter what you do, you're going to fail to survive. You just have to try and survive. That's all you can do is survive. Anything else, don't have any delusions it's going to work. Next, we'll go to another film about don't have any delusions it's going to work, is The Killing. The Killing is wonderful. This is a film about a heist that goes wrong mainly because the people involved have their own flaws, and the film's about the people more than the heist. The heist is well done. The heist is done in a flashback, flash forward structure where you're getting information and you come back a bit and get it from another person's point of view. But it does tell you the mechanics of the heist, but what it's really doing is showing you the downfall of the people, because you get a first section where you're finding out the people and you're seeing their flaws, you're seeing how they're compromised by their own inadequacies, their own problems. And Jim Thompson, the hardboiled writer, wrote this as an adaptation of a novel. They took the novel, he wrote the characters, and the characterisation is terrific. It's about all these losers who have been forced into crime just because their lives have collapsed on them. And you have a professional criminal played by Sterling Hayden who is fairly cold-blooded, and he's just about the mission, and he will get that money and get away. That's his only reason for living. And it is about all these weird compromises you have to make to try and survive in a dog-eat-dog world, and it's basically about capitalism, you know. It's a heist movie, but capitalism is kind of the metaphor. It's like how in capitalism some people are just going to be natural losers, and they'll be losers because of their own egos, their own flaws in the system. They cannot get together to pull off anything. In this time it's a heist, but it can also be about business, and you get the people who are really professional, but they can have bad luck as well, and how fate just destroys your plans. But it really is this venture. It's all about money. It's how it try to survive and get more money, and as if that's the thing that's going to give you the most happiness, you know. And it's about people's failures, their moral failings, their failings with each other, and their failings to get a grip in their life, because they're all such losers because they've lost their foothold in life anyway, and they go to this desperate thing. So already all are losers who haven't really done much of their lives. So it's a bit of system, a bit of society that has that these people are in, and they've caused their own problems, but it's also a system that doesn't have much sympathy for them, so they feel that they deserve their money by illicit means. So it is a good look at society, a capitalistic society. And it's not a simplistic thing, oh, capitalism is bad. It's like, shows you like, yeah, it leaves people behind, but also these people have their own problems, their own issues, and they're as much to blame as anything else for what happens to them. It's a very complicated film. It is very underrated compared to the later Kubrick films, but it was the first film he made. It was made after Killer's Kiss. It was the first one he thought, oh, this is a talent. It's the first time you can see entirely this talent will work. This talent knows what he's doing. Because he did this then Paths of Glory, so that was a big double header of real success. So The Killing is wonderful. Okay, next is The Shining. Now, you're probably thinking The Shining's a bit low on the score here. Well, basically from Full Metal Jacket onwards, we're into favourite films anyway, so it's just that the other Kubrick films I like more than The Shining, and I adore The Shining. The Shining is a wonderfully horror story that's horrible in different ways, whether it be a marriage falling apart and just brutal bits of dialogue and exposition, and it's like they explain certain things, but most of it's implied in their interactions of how they are dealing with each other, and the ghosts in the hotel were just a metaphor for all of their problems. And there's a great metaphor of the maze, as a metaphor for how they're very lost in their lives. And then the ghosts within the hotel are also a sort of maze which they're trying to make sense of, but they can't because they're very flawed, animalistic characters who just can't. They're trying to make sense of their life and make sense of the afterlife and what is their own existence, and they can't quite figure it out, so they just tear into each other. And then basically the wife has to defend the son because Jack Nicholson's character goes insane and has potential of being a novelist, but has no. The big joke is he has no ideas. He's got all the drive to be a novelist, but he doesn't have any ideas. All he's got is sarcasm and nastiness and a hollowed out feeling because he can't drink. And without the drink, his imagination is just gone, and he just slowly goes mad. And you find out later on he went mad much earlier than you thought he did. And it's been a slow process that you're just seeing the last few minutes of, basically. It's a wonderful film, very creepy, and it's a very dark film about the human soul and what happens to it when things go wrong. It is tied to the killing in a way because it's another one where people in desperate straits make really bad decisions and how it brutalises them. Okay, now we're going to another family film from Kubrick, which is Lolita. Lolita is based on the controversial novel about paedophilia by Vladimir Nabokov. It was a film that Kubrick had his own problems with for his adaptation, but it's a beautiful film. I think he put a film in his head that he can never match is probably the problem, because it is like it's a very dark comedy. Peter Sellers is in it, James Mason stars in it, Shelley Duvall's in it, not Shelley Duvall, Shelley Winters, and it is that it's a film that I paired with The Shining when I did my film degree dissertation, because it was all about family and family tension and things. But this is like takes in the idea of sexuality and warped sexuality and what it does to a person. How this very civilised man, humbug, played by James Mason, a professor, gets infatuated with this girl who's underage, and all the extreme things he does to get her, and how he falls in love with her. But it's a very dark romance because she is underage and he is basically doing criminal actions, and he is destroying her life and destroying her ability to grow naturally by basically kidnapping her and taking her around the country and bedding her, and he's oblivious to any of the things he does, what it costs to this girl and what it costs her family to fall apart. And he's like this kind of romantic who doesn't realise he's the poisonous element in everyone's lives. It's a dark side of romance where the person's so self-involved, so myopic, he doesn't realise his narrow vision is blinding him from so many consequences that he should be aware of, but he isn't. And it's a dark comedy about the darker side of romance, but how romance can blind you from reality. And this is the worst case because it's about someone in love with someone underage who hasn't been developed yet, who's not ready for any of this stuff, who's just at the stage of basically being with boys of their own age and things like that, but not sexually, just as a play. And Humbert destroys all that. So it's a tragedy. It is a romance, but it's a romance that you do feel guilty about because it is very dark. It does question some of the drives in romance in a very twisted, difficult way. And it's a beautiful film, even though the subject matter is horrible, and it is one of Kubrick's most underrated films. It is just beautiful and wonderful. Okay, now Eyes Wide Shut is... we're going towards the end now. You'll be pleased to know. Eyes Wide Shut was Kubrick's final film, and I would definitely say Lolita's shining in this is like his family trilogy. You know, I mean, Fear and Desire, Paths of Glory, and Full Metal Jacket is his war trilogy. This is his family trilogy. This final one it's very dark, and a lot of people hated it when it first came out. It came out after Kubrick died, so the version you've got is a version that was his cut that he showed the studio, then he died, and then he'd finished post-production, but didn't really change anything. And now everyone knows Kubrick tinkered till the end in his film, so there's no way this was his final version. This is the version you got, and it is wonderful. There's lots of interesting moments. It is a bit long for some people, and the pace of it gets to some people and annoys them. I love it. I can watch it whenever, without a problem. I saw it twice in the cinema, and the second time I saw it was actually in this older cinema, and with an older projections, and it looked absolutely gorgeous. It looked beautiful. And the thing is, there's certain way to let things, if you don't see it projected properly, you don't get the effect of this sort of old fairy story feel. Now the lights were almost blown out and create this weird impression of it's a real world but not. It's like it's just strange and weird, and everything makes more sense when it's like that. But so I'm looking forward to getting to see the 4K restoration of this one, because this one will look amazing when it finally gets to 4K. It's a beautiful film about marriage, about the idea of being married and the fantasies that happen in someone's head after being married for a while, and what it says about them, what it says about the partner, and how it can lead them astray into craziness in their own head even though they don't do anything. And there's this whole idea with this, he's chasing down a sexual encounter because his wife's prodded him because she's been smug and she's been annoyed by him, and he kind of takes it too far and ends up getting involved with this weird cult that's of all these rich people who have this massive orgy at this house. But is it a dream or is it reality? And when I saw it projected properly, that came through a lot more. And we see it with in like mediocre projection, it's not quite the same. But this is a wonderful film, very underrated. Like Lolita, it's very underrated. It's like people prefer certain Kubrick films to be a certain way, and I like it when he deals with family and things like that. I think he's interesting insights that sometimes people like to ignore, because it's, when you talk about family, it's always you want to see the happy side of it. And Kubrick, I think because he famously had a pretty good family life, was actually unafraid of showing the darker side of family life and all the stuff that's going on below the surface. So these are wonderful films. Okay, now we're going to the top 3. Now number 3 is Dr. Strangelove. Dr. Strangelove is wonderful. It's hilarious. It's about the end of the world and how all the bureaucracy can destroy a society. How a society's function can get so tangled in its own egos, its own paranoias, its own inefficiencies. See, this is why I don't like Clockwork Orange, because it has the government just this one thing. And this one, it shows how weird the government actually is, and how strange it is, and how it's full of people with different agendas, and just basically how complicated it is, even though this is a farce about a general going mad, setting off World War III, and then trying to stop World War III, and all the safeguards come back to haunt them and cause me more havoc, and how it basically ends with the end of the world. It's a hilarious movie, great performance by everybody. Peter Sellers has 3 terrific parts in it. 3. I did 2 there for some reason. It's just wonderful. It's a wonderful film. just go watch it. I don't want to say anything about this one because you just have to watch it fresh as you can, because it is such a surprising, weird film with lots of terrific dialogue and just oddity of nature. And Sterling Hayden is stunningly good. I mean, you would Peter Sellers in 3 parts, but Sterling Hayden still steals the film. It's just amazing. Now top 2. Number 2 is 2001: A Space Odyssey. This is just wonderful. This is the film that, in some ways, was my film that moved me from childhood to adulthood, where I was watching childhood sci-fi movies and I saw 2001, and I kind of saw what grown-up sci-fi was beyond Star Wars and stuff, and what actual sci-fi was, like sci-fi with ideas and sense of awe about the world and a sense of awe about the universe. And this is stunning. Again, it's one of those films you should just see and not know that much about, just see and experience it. It's going to take a few times to get it all in. You'll get the main story the first time, but all the nuances will come through the more you see it, and all the how it's paced comes through. It's slowly paced so that for some people it's hypnotic and other people are bored. Cause I remember sitting in the cinema once with some people from when I was a film student, and one person walked out because they were bored, and the other 3 of us were watching it like, ugh, because we hadn't seen the cinema at that point, and we were just like enthralled. I think we'd all seen it on TV, we'd never seen it in a big screen. So 2001 is stunning, and the final moments, the image of the Star Child over the Earth is just so beautiful. It's such a wonderful sense of transformation for the human race. It is one of the most beautiful images to end a film on, which I think people forget the hopeful side of Kubrick sometimes. When you see something at the end of 2001, there is more to Kubrick than darkness and dark humour. There is like a hopeful side to him and a human side to him. And the human side comes up in my favourite Kubrick film, which is Barry Lyndon, which was hated on release, or it was snobbishly looked down upon as Kubrick tried to be respectable. And apparently even Kubrick didn't like it that much in its first release, because it was such a bomb that he thought it'd been a bad film, and he never thought much about it, and he moved on with his career. And then later on, he managed to see it later and he realised how good it was, which is good. He finally saw it was good, because Barry Lyndon is amazing. It's the story of, I mean, it has Ryan O'Neal in the lead, and Ryan O'Neal was not usually thought of as a good actor, but Kubrick got a performance out of him. You know, I don't know how many takes it took, but he got the performance. And there's some great supporting actors throughout it, and it's all about Barry Lyndon as this like young Irish guy. He starts off naive but slowly learns the way of the world during the Napoleonic Wars, and he marries into a good family, becomes rich, and because he's immature he destroys it all and ends up back where he started with nothing. But that sounds depressing, and it is depressing, but the mood of the film is wonderful. It takes you through this whole society, this society is repressed in some ways. There's a lot of rules you have to know and follow, and you see Barry learn the rules of it all, learn about gambling, learn about military, how you are as a soldier, and how you are as an officer, and how you are as a gentleman. So it takes in the whole world, but also shows you how a life can be undone in this world, how a life can be destroyed by a lack of foreknowledge and lack of attention to detail, which ties back all the way back to Kubrick with the killing. You know, Kubrick is very consistent. I mean, even someone like Jack Thomas in The Shining, he's destroyed by his own flaws. You know, everyone's taken down by the flaws in Kubrick films. And, you know, there it is. There's my list. Quite a few of these films I've read on videos on, like 2001 or The Shining. So I look at my back catalogue and you'll see some Kubrick films there. Kubrick's one of my favourite directors. Obviously I didn't go into great detail of all these films, but go and watch Folgers, and it's our episode 10, which they talk about their favourite Kubrick films. I mocked them earlier, go watch it. But I am pretty sure that SGS Films is Rennie Harlan's secret love child. You know, I'm pretty sure of that. But go see their video too, and I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll be back soon with some more videos this week. Right, bye for now.